Hey, what's up guys? So the Radenso DS1 just received a new firmware update. It's firmware version 1.09, and there's a number of nice improvements here in this latest update. We've got some improvements to the GPS lockouts. We've got a number of improvements to the K-notch features to improve the false alert filtering. We've got some additional new features that have been added, plus there's going to be some bug fixes available in this update. Now the update, it's now available over on Radenso's website, or you can download it using their app. I'll put links to where you can grab the update down in the video description. And in this video, we're going to go over all the new changes and improvements here with this new update. So to go over all the new changes and improvements here, I actually have a pair of Radenso DS1s up on the windshield. One running the older firmware, the other one running the newer firmware. This way I can do a quick side-by-side and show you the new changes and improvements here with this latest update. So starting off, we've got some additional advanced controls over the GPS lockouts, and specifically the frequency range that the GPS lockouts cover. You'll see now under the GPS settings, there's a new option here for advanced lockouts. And if we go over there, you can see we have control over, well, how wide the different GPS lockouts are. By default, they're going to be 10 megahertz. If you want wider lockouts, you can do plus minus 15 megahertz or plus minus 20 megahertz. Now, this can be useful in case you run into situations where your GPS lockouts are not sticking. Meaning, let's say there's a speed sign or something, and then over time, especially if the temperature changes or something, the frequency of that speed sign can change, and so it'll actually drift outside of the frequency range of your GPS lockouts. If that's the case, you can actually make your lockouts wider to help ensure that your lockout keeps these different signals locked out. Now, the risk is it could potentially cover additional signals that you don't want the GPS lockout covering, but just like some of the more sophisticated apps that are available that give you better control over GPS lockouts, we now have the ability to actually control the frequency range here of the GPS lockouts with the DS1. Next, we've got a new feature here to show the speed here in big text here on screen. With the previous version, if you wanted to display the speed, it's just this little bitty number here up in the corner. Now you can get it to actually take up the entire screen, which I really like. This is my new favorite display mode here in the DS1, and I love having the big speedometer on display. I think it does a much better job of utilizing the big display here that the DS1 has. And to access it, when you go into the display settings and then idle mode, you'll see there's a new option here to display the speed. You've got your other options, of course, just like before. You can do the scanning bar, which is this. You can display the time on screen here if you like, or you can do the speed, which is what I'm running the detector with. Next, we've got some changes for those of you guys who don't have a cigarette lighter built into your car, and instead you're relying on the USB ports in your car to power the Radenso DS1. Now, that power input port is used for both powering the detector and for updating the detector. And there's times when the detector would have actually gotten confused and it sees plugging into your car, oh, maybe I should go into update mode because I can communicate with the car. This doesn't look like just a power input port. And so for some people, they would actually run into issues powering on their detector properly when plugging it into the car's USB port. So now anytime there's power being fed into the USB port on the Radenso DS1, that's just going to keep the detector powered on. It's no longer going to send the detector into update mode. And that's also going to affect now when you plug the detector into your computer for updates, it's no longer going to send your computer into update mode. There's now a new way to actually put the detector manually into update mode when you're ready to update the detector. So the way it's going to work now is when you want to put your detector into update mode, you're going to press and hold the volume down button and the volume up button, basically minus and plus at the same time. And we'll do it over here in the new detector. So I'm going to press and hold both buttons, and then you'll see that in just a second, the display powers off like that, and now the detector is going to be set into update mode. And so now, assuming you've got the detector in update mode when you've got it plugged into your computer, the update software is going to be able to read the DS1. It's going to see what firmware version you have currently loaded, and it's going to allow you to go ahead and grab the latest update and upload it to your detector. And so that's going to be the trick now for updating your detector. Next, there's been some improvements to the K-notch feature to help deal with some of the blind spot falses that the detector may experience. Now, first off, there was a bug with the previous firmware to where in certain instances it could actually completely block a signal within the K-notch frequency range that it's supposed to be alerting to. And this could potentially lead to a ticket because it could actually be blocking a police radar gun, even though you've been telling the detector, I want you to alert to signals in this frequency range in certain conditions. And so that bug has now been addressed here with the DS1 with this latest update. Next, Radenso has increased the number of frequency ranges that K-notch will cover. They basically added 2 additional frequency ranges to help the detector actually filter out some additional blind spot falses. So you've got one frequency range that's been added just under 24.168 or so, which is a really common frequency range for your Hondas and Acuras and Jeeps and GMs and a bunch of other vehicles. Plus, they've added a second K-notch frequency range on the upper end of K-band to help deal with some of the additional false alerts that you may see from some Honda pilots. And so now the K-notch feature can actually deal with some additional blind spot falses that it couldn't before. Next, there's been some changes to the menu itself and the different settings. So you can see the older version had this option here for the K-notch display. The new one doesn't have it at all. And this would have actually just controlled how the detector displays K-notch signals. That feature has been removed because they've updated how the K-notch actually displays on screen. So now if you go into the K-notch option for both detectors, you'll notice that there's some different options. And so before, we just had the ability to block all signals or just block weak signals. Now it's a little bit different. We can block all signals like before. We could mute all signals, basically just audibly mute them, but still display them on screen. Or we could just mute weak signals, but then, full alert for normal signals. But they would still be visually displayed on screen the entire time. Or we could we could turn off the K-notch functionality altogether. My preference is just to mute weak signals, but again, still show them on screen. And then if the signal gets stronger, then you're going to be audibly alerting, plus you're going to now be visually alerting more as well. And so when the signals are being muted, not blocked, but muted, they're going to be grayed out on screen. And then when they're alerting normally, you're going to be getting the normal display on screen. Additionally, this K-notch functionality is going to work in both auto mode and in custom mode with the DS1. And speaking of auto mode, there's been some new changes to where the auto mode works. Before, auto mode would basically switch between highway mode and city mode. Depending on if you're over 50 miles an hour, it would switch to highway mode for full sensitivity. And then if you drop below 50 miles an hour, it would switch to basically city mode and kind of reduce the sensitivity on X and K band. Now we actually have the ability to control that speed threshold and adjust kind of when it switches between city and highway mode. So now if you go into the user preferences, there's going to be an option here for the auto speed setting threshold, and you can basically set the speed. Like I mentioned, you could do 50 like it was before, or you can go all the way up to 60 miles an hour or all the way as low as 15. Next, there's been a change to the way the detector actually handles unmuting after it's previously muted a signal. Before, if the detector would mute a signal, but then it disappeared, it would actually resume alerting if that signal comes back after just 2 seconds or more. And so it could be possible for you to mute the signal would go away, and then a few seconds later it would come back and the detector would resume alerting. And so now that mute latch, it's going to actually wait 15 seconds. And so it has to wait at least 15 seconds for that signal to come back again before it resumes alerting. This way, in case you mute a signal, the signal is going to stay muted longer, especially if it's kind of coming and going. Additionally, the detector is going to do a better job now in case it's seeing multiple signals. So let's say you mute one signal, and then if it sees a new signal, different frequency range, if it sees a second new signal, then it's going to do a better job of actually alerting to this new signal as well. And so kind of the muting and unmuting behavior has been improved here with this latest update too. Next, there's been some changes to the new Bogey alert tone options. So if we go in here and take a look at the different options, you'll notice tone number 2 and number 3 were super similar. Right? And so for that reason, they basically just removed one of those options here. So there used to be 5 different options. And then if you go all the way to the end, you can see there's no ability to actually turn off this new Bogey alert tone. Now with this new update, when you go into the Bogey option, you'll see that there's only 4 options available now, because they've removed basically, 2 and 3 of the duplicate ones. And so now all the tones are going to be different. Plus we have the ability to just disable the new Bogey alert tone altogether, which I think is very helpful. And speaking of disabling different alert tones, they've actually made a change for the speed camera and red light camera alerts. So there's a new option here in the menu for the pass chime, to where basically, do you want the detector to kind of chime and give you an audible notification of when you passed a red light camera or a speed camera? There's a new option here in the menu to where you can turn that on, or you can just leave it at the default option, which is to basically not give you any alert tone when you pass a red light camera or speed camera. Next, we've got a bug fix for K-band alerts. So with both detectors, you can see I currently have K-band turned on. And then if I go down here to pop K-band detection for pop mode, you can see for both of these, I have it turned on, right? So most people aren't going to need this in practice. But assuming you have that feature turned on, let's go back to both detectors. And we're going to go ahead and disable K-band on both detectors. And then you'll notice when I go ahead and do a quick K-band shot, this detector is going to alert to K-band even though I just disabled K-band. On this detector, you can see they fixed that bug so that K-band is no longer going to be alerted to just because I left the pop detection on. With the old firmware, you'd have to go in here and actually disable pop detection on K-band. And then if you do that, then K-band detection is fully disabled. Now with this latest update, if you disable K-band, it disables K-band regardless of what you've got your K-band pop setting set to, right? And so that's a new change here with this latest update. And so, yeah, that's just a quick run through as far as all the new changes and improvements here with firmware 1.09. If you want to get your detector updated, again, you can head on over to Radenso's website. You can now download the new firmware over on their website. Additionally, you're going to be able to update your detector using the Android Radenso Nexus app as well when the update is available in the app too. And so, yeah, for more information about all this, head on over to the forum for full discussion, and I've got an article on my website that goes into a little bit more information about this as well. And so with that said, yeah, thanks to Radenso for continuing to update the DS1. And there you go. There's a run through as far as the latest updates and changes. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.